All right, I'm Brad Coley. I'm a forestry major here in Mornell. I'm a senior. I did my internship with the Westervelt company in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. A little bit about the company. They were founded in 1884 by Herbert Westervelt. They're a land resource organization managing approximately 500,000 acres throughout the southeast. Most of their land is in Alabama. They also have a little bit in South Georgia near Statesboro, and a little bit up in I think it's Virginia, and they may have a couple of land holdings in Mississippi, but most. They have two mills, one's a sawmill in Mountain, Alabama. The other one's a pellet mill. I got to visit both of them. The businesses they're involved with are Southern Yellow Pine Lumber Manufacturing, Renewable Resources, Ecological Restoration Services, Real Estate, Sport and Lodges, Mitigation and Conservation Banking, and Wildlife Management. And most of my affiliation was just with the Southern Yellow Pine Lumber Manufacturing and the Renewable Resources. They're headquartered out of Tuscaloosa, and they have 4 surrounding district offices.
Still privately held, right?
Yes, sir.
So no corporate structure whatsoever? All?
So I divided mine up into the sections that I worked with, because I kind of made it as I went throughout the summer instead of once I got the syllabus. So I spent my first couple weeks with wood flow. Really a laid back couple of weeks. I didn't do too much. We cruised a little bit. We did cruise one track that they wanted us to go ahead and cruise right when we got there because they had it scheduled to harvest within the next few weeks. We got the shadow harvest coordinator. We looked at some logger contracts. Visited a couple of thinning operations to make sure that the loggers were going by the prescription. We'd go out there and just do a few plots with a prism and make sure they were leaving the right basal area. And we tallied defective trees and damaged trees. And then for the next few weeks, I think I spent 3 weeks with silviculture. I spent my first week here at the nursery. They just basically threw us out there to let us get a feel for how the nursery operates. We helped out with a few things around there. Some of our biggest projects were folding the shade cloth. That was right here. They have about 7 million seedlings, and we had to fold all the shade cloth that they had used to get those seedlings to germinate. So that took about 3 days to do that. We also assisted with setting up a longleaf pine germination test, which is right here. That's just counting out the seeds, and basically we just counted out the seeds and then put them in a little Tupperware container thing with a wet cloth, and he was counting the days for germination on them because they had had some germination problems with some of the different genetics that they were running. So we did that. We did a little bit of hand spraying on some of their test sites with just backpack sprayers just to control the competition on them. I think they were 4-year-old pines. We assisted with some of the debris cleanup, which is just basic maintenance and stuff. It was just some of the trees the tops had fallen out of them, stuff like that. And then some of the other stuff we did was we got to go along on an aerial spraying audit where on this particular one they had a little bit of overspray onto the adjacent property, and they were explaining to us about that and how they had to deal with the other landowner. And then we also went on a herbicide and planting prescription it was actually a new guy, and we were going with their senior silviculture manager, I guess you would call him. We went out there and just kind of shadowed that just to see how they, prescribe what they were based on the terrain and, where they were at. So that was some good experience there. One of our biggest projects with the silviculture group was working on a forest health project, and they had several stands that they had picked out for us. It was 7 stands, and they believed that it was southern pine decline that was causing mortality, and they picked these stands out because there was obvious damage. There was obvious mortality just when you riding by or walking by the stand. You could see, the amount of dead trees out there. And so this is what they were believing was causing it, and I just threw a description about it. This was kind of new to me. I took Forest Health here, and I don't remember ever talking about southern pine decline. So I had to kind of do research on it at the same time I was trying to go out there and work in the woods with it. So, but basically, it's just a disease resulting from a combination of biotic and abiotic factors, and these are just some of the factors right here: the tree age, topography, soil, organic matter, drought, storm damage. So it's pretty complex, and even some of the silviculture guys I was working with said they you know, it's, you can kind of comprehend it, but you can't explain it. But other than the southern pine decline, we thought that some of the factors causing mortality causing an increase in mortality was the amount of human interaction in the stand. Because on some of once we read all our data, some of the stands with the highest mortality actually had the most human interaction, and the ones with the least mortality had just been visited 1 or 2 times for a thinning or something like that. So, that's the as a result of southern pine decline, mortality is caused by beetles that get in the roots, and they vector this leptographium fungi, and then some of the symptoms we were looking for when we were classifying these trees were low leaf area index and short chlorotic needles. And then we didn't really get to do any of this, but they did have several sites out there where they had done root samples, and they had those on the map too. So this is how we carried out our project. We cruised each one of these stands and classified the severity as low, moderate, or severe, and they limited us to 35 plots max, no matter how big our stands were. I think our biggest stand was almost 90 acres, and they didn't want us to do any more than 35 plots. We did 1/20th acre plots, so we pulled a tape on all of our plots. We tallied everything in the solo field, and they had the program set up to classify the trees as surviving, stressed, or dead. And then once the data was processed, it gave us a percentage of the mortality and the stressed. And that's what this table is here. These are the 7 stands, and the amount of plots we took at each stand, and then the average surviving, average stress, and average dead. And then the average showing symptomatics, and then that was the average trees per acre. And this was the result we were trying to get. So the highest one was 33% mortality, or showing signs of mortality. This information, they're fixing to get ready to go ahead and harvest that stand. And this is just when we put the layers into GIS, this is what the maps look like that we made. And you can see this is a risk map, the background showing the big blotchy colors. That's a hazard level risk map that they provided us with that shows the hazard or the risk for southern pine decline in that area. I think it was based off of soil type and aspect. So they gave us that, and then once we processed our data, we were able to put it into GIS, and we didn't really see any kind of correlation as far as high hazard with high mortality. It was kind of all over the board. So that was kind of our conclusion. There was no major correlations were found with the Alabama hazard risk map.
I was going to say, where did the risk map come from? I haven't.
They provided us with that. It was a research something. I want to say it was from somebody in Georgia, but I'm not sure. But somebody did some research on it, and they came up with this risk map. And they just gave that to us. Didn't really tell us how they got it. But I know there was a lot of research done on it, and I think it was mainly based off of aspect. And then, so when I finished with that project, I spent 3 weeks with harvest scheduling, and some of our tasks there were doing streamside management zone audits where these SMZs were already marked out, but we were looking at maps and areas that had, like, how a type of map looks. I mean, you got sharp areas and it looks like it might be a ditch or something there. So we had to go out and look at each one of those areas to see if the SMZ should have been wider or extended longer. And that's basically what I just said, how we did it there. We also looked at sensitive areas, and I think of I did about 30 of these, and I think of the 30, I had about 10 that need to be revisited to consider extending the SMZ. So we made notes on our maps and then turned those in to harvest scheduling. And then I spent several weeks, or about a week and a half, doing this. And this is basically, I think, what Childers was talking about, just painting, refreshing the paint on their special sites. And I think they have to keep these special sites in good condition for their certifications, and they are FSC and SFI certified. So I went out there and refreshed the paint around cemeteries. There were a few glades that they had marked out. I had to make sure there were signs visible on at least 3 or 4 sides, and just replace the signs as needed. We did a little bit of cruising with the harvest scheduling group also. I actually did an acquisition cruise with Chase Brooks. He graduated from here in May with his MFR. I worked with him and did an acquisition cruise. We did a little bit or kind of helped a little bit with controlled burning. They didn't let us get too involved with that. We did get to do a aerial application observation. That was for site prep. We went with a couple of their rangers and did a stand harvest setup. We basically just marked the cell boundary and the SMZs. And then we did an internal SMZ audit, which is kind of the silviculture manager would go and look at the site after they harvested and made sure, they were following the BMPs, and we looked at some of the SMZs to make sure that they didn't cut in too close, and that was most of what that was about. And then they just questioned the logger or the harvest coordinators. So. And then one of our second biggest project, which was kind of wrapped up my internship, was working with land information systems, and we were doing site index sampling. For this project, we just collected data from various sites to estimate site index by species and location. We at each site we recorded the basal area using a our method that we used to do this. We selected dominant or codominant trees at each site on each plot and measured the DBH, the height to the crown, the total number of rings, and then the number of rings within the last 3 inches of growth and the number of rings within the last inch of growth once we cored the tree. And well, that was basically that project there, and we spent 4 weeks doing that. Most of our tree or sites were hardwoods or mixed pine hardwoods, and they gave us the maps were provided on an iPod or iPad, and he may have used some system to lay out the plots, but what it looked like to us is he just went through and clicked where he wanted us to put our plots in, and we had a GPS running off Bluetooth with the iPod, and that's where we navigated to the plot and put in each plot there. And the results from that, we categorized our sites at each plot as poorly drained, moderately drained, well drained, or very well drained. That's the tree count at each at each site. That's the total trees we bored. It's actually more than that because this table was put together a few days before the end of our internship, so we did a little over 400 trees. About 80% of those were hardwoods and about 20% pine. Average age and height, basal area, and then these were the site indexes for each site, which was kind of what they were expecting, as the moderately drained was the highest site index, and the very well drained, which is pretty much what we classified on hilltops, were
Base
the.
age?
What's that?
What base age? Index age?
On the hardwoods it was 50,
Yeah.
and I think on the pines it was 25.
Yeah, those all look like 50s based on your heights and your ages.
And then these 3 columns here are just the measurements on the rings, the average growth based on the ring measurements that we took, the yearly growth. So did a lot of different stuff. Didn't do as much cruising as I thought I was going to, which I kind of would have liked to have done a little bit more just to get a little bit more experience, because I know once I get a career in forestry, I'm going to probably start out doing a lot of cruising. So I would like to have done a little more of that. And I also, for this project right here, the site to go collect the data, we didn't have much help or much hand in processing all this data. And when I did my exit interview, that's what I mentioned, is I wish I would have been a little more involved with processing the data that we collected to help understand it a little bit better. I mean, I got the gist of what we were doing and why we were doing it,
Yeah.
but I would have liked to have had a hand in processing this data, and so I can just have a better feel for it.